22nd. I have a live read today, and I must admit two things. Super tired, did not sleep well last night. Shit happens. And I'm really excited to do this live reading. Wait, is it hopefully? I guess I could have done it on a different day when I wasn't tired, but it is what it is. So, not to bore you with my life stuff, so let's dive into the story. Today we're going to talk a little bit of review of the wow, messed that all up. Backtracked it. We're going to read from the Diary of the Damsel Dame by Lee Stackhouse, which is the first book in a series, which I forgot the name of the series, so I'm going to look it up real quick. Sorry, Lee, my bad. Let's see, here we go. Got to go to the book one of the Delilah Vale saga, so I kind of love that. So we're going to start off by reading, the prologue, which includes trigger warnings. We're going to do a little bit of reading. We probably won't complete the prologue, but it's actually very important. So this book contains graphic depictions of wow, words today. Neglect, violence, gore, murder, stalking, intrusive thoughts, psychosis, narcissism, suicide, child abuse, substance abuse, sexual abuse of a teenager, and death. Boom. Yeah, it really does. So this book needed a trigger warning for sure. It delves into the disturbing psychology of obsession, control, and the disintegration of empathy. Please read responsibly and take breaks when needed, especially if you are sensitive to topics involving trauma, mental illness, or abuse. No doubt. Writing this book nearly broke me. I love that statement in the prologue because it's so important, and quite frankly, as a writer myself, I've only had one book where I can say that it got close to that much raw emotion. And it's funny because this book is my only nonfiction. I don't know if I'll ever do a nonfiction again. And this is not a self-promotion because the current book that I'm talking about, the book that I'm talking about that almost broke me is actually antiquated. Not really relevant anymore in its fitness. Might get back to it, might not. But I'll return to the prologue. To step into the mind of a narcissistic serial-killing stalker, to breathe her breath, to see the world throughout her fractal logic, to justify cruelty and call it love, was one of the most difficult things I've ever done. There were moments I had to stop mid-sentence, my hands trembling, tears streaming down my face, unable to continue. There were nights I dreamt in her voice, her thoughts threading into mine, her obsession bleeding through like ink on a thin page, and yet I knew I had to write her story. So I'm going to end the prologue right there because bottom line, I don't want to give anything away. That's kind of a thing when I do a reading. And also I want to be able to hook the audience if this is your thing. Now, I will say that I'm just going to go ahead and give away how many stars I gave this book. I gave this book 5 stars because the prologue is essentially a preview of what's going to happen. And, nowadays, this is kind of funny. Back to myself. When a book delivers what it says it's going to do, you got to read it. If it gives you a heads up, you got to read it. And how I am bringing that back to myself is because one of my latest reviews on the Diary, which I will probably be reading later on this week, we'll do a live read of that. One of the reviewers said, I was looking forward to it, but it didn't deliver. It wasn't that scary. Now, I'm not really sure what this gal reads, but if that's their view, that's their view. And the reality is, it's kind of like, did the book deliver? So, the Diary of a Damsel Dame delivers. Trigger warnings for sure. So, we'll go ahead and start with the first. She didn't break it up into chapters. She broke it up into sections that are diary entries. So, very good device. Saturday, April 12th, 2025, 4:12 a.m. The mold, the man, the mystery. I made it into the 27 club, although I've heard the trick is making it out of it. Great freaking first line. I'm still up. My birthday was welcomed by the ceiling dripping right in the plastic mixing bowl I've wedged between my bed and the vanity. The sound is agonizing, like Chinese water torture for a girl already teetering. 3 times in the last 6 months, I've emailed the landlord to fix it. I might as well have asked the exotic species of mold growing in the corner. It seems more lively than management, anyway. If I'm being honest, I thought I'd be further along at this age. Passing through a screen door by the Wonder Years is serenading me on the failures through my Bluetooth radio wrapped in pink glitter and fashioned after a jukebox. So that sentence is so much of the younger generation, kind of how they live their lives. And it's sort of like the Ernest Hemingway thing where the greatest story ever told is one pair of baby shoes never used. The reality is, in writing, less is more. Brevity is key. I forget that all the time. I just continue to ramble, kind of like I'm rambling at the moment. But Lee, that was a great line. It just kind of brings together what the angst of young people. Need some coffee real quick. Hang on one second. The lyrics are hitting a little too close to home. Maybe I really did fuck up. Truer words have never been spoken. Welcome to my studio apartment somewhere in the steaming garbage belly of Chicago. Technically, it's Wicker Park. Practically, it's one broken stair away from being condemned. It's the only building left in the neighborhood yet to be gentrified by some haughty developer, a subsidiary of BlackRock. The transformation would later be blamed on the wealthy tenants. Naturally. Groaning like a dying boar, the heater squeals to life. One of the walls near the kitchenette has kicked in, exposing Pepto-Pink insulation, trying to escape. I'm a huge fan of Pop of Pastel, though. The mold my new roommate is tucked in the corner above the cracked baseboard, flowering out like an abstract piece of public art no taxpayer ever asked for. In fact, I'd wager taxpayers have begged for everything but its existence. Superb writing. An expertly placed psychedelic tapestry is trying to feng shui the black rot away in shades of bubblegum and slime. The backdrop to my vanity lipsticks and lashes acting as camouflage concealer over a wound. Near the back corner, I built a small plastic shed, zip-tied corrugated plastic, complete with roof and shower curtain entryway, a beaded curtain acting as an alarm. A folding easel sits inside with crates of cheap acrylic paint and a wobbly desk I dragged home, discarded 3 blocks down. A fluffy pink chair that leaves foul fur strands on the back of my thighs sits waiting by my laptop, nestled beside a mug of gel pens and half-eaten bag of chocolate almonds. While I'm inside, I imagine myself as a princess in a tower tragically awaiting her prince, or the evil witch burning the castle down. That's such a great line. The small space gives off a sense of safety, a layer of delusional protection from a world that has only shown it can hurt me. Should I stop there? No. Lined with canvases of unfinished dreamscapes, cloud kingdoms with rainbow skulls, or a tree with a trunk door leading to a secret underworld of fairies, the walls cover the damage, the holes, the mold. Art as a band-aid, art as denial. Shoved into the only corner with a view, a canopy of glittery twilight drapes above my head, knotted on one side like there's any possibility of romance. A fuzzy blanket that comforts me like a cat lays, wrinkled and alluring atop cotton sheets. When I lie just right, on my stomach with my face pressed in the pillow, I can glimpse out of the bottom of the window where the glass isn't fogged over from dirt and rain. That's what I'm doing now, watching. Across the street, apartment lights flicker on one by one, exposing the city's sleepy little lies. The stranglers and the skanks are arriving at what they pretend to call home. The truth is their hearts are too empty to call anywhere home. They feel gravely empty inside, so they stay out all night and feed the void with distraction before coming back to empty walls and crashing into unconsciousness in a last-ditch effort to escape that feeling of home alone. The next day, they're sure to slug down enough caffeine to regain awareness of their sorrowful solitude and flee into the abyss of sin and city, a repeating pattern of barely existing. Pain rinsed and repackaged for a new day of late-stage capitalism and existential woe. What they don't realize now is the time for company, for comfort, for home. Loneliness was never meant for the living. It is especially designed for the dying by Satan himself. Whether we're surrounded by loved ones or not, it's only the one slipping into the next world that is experiencing death. Dying is the loneliest moment of anyone's life, and everyone seems hell-bent on getting there ASAP. So, the introduction of the main character, their world, I should say, is dark, gritty, foreboding, because it doesn't really say much of what they're thinking, doing, so on and so forth. And that adds a certain degree of tragedy to the character. It adds quite a bit of, what's the word I'm looking for? Mystery to the character, quite a bit of it. Mystery may not actually be strong enough a word, but definitely like it. The mechanics in the Diary of the Damsel were very good because they were smart. They incorporated a lot of devices. They painted in a very, vivid world. It was dark, foreboding, all that different stuff. So sometimes mechanics become less important. They have books that are called guilty pleasures. This is tough because the next book, it suffered from a little bit of mechanical stuff. Did that stop me from reading it? No. Matter of fact, I couldn't put it down. One, because It was good. It was a good story. It had a lot of depth. It had a lot of character. It had a lot of that. The mechanics, you were able to look past it. I'm not going to lie. And I say that knowing my own struggle with mechanics. Does it sound like I'm being a little critical? Well, I get to because this gentleman's book is a little bit more popular than mine, all of mine combined. So, do I get to be a little bit envious, a little green? Absolutely. I'll go ahead and do that because it was a good book and it's made a good impact. People really like it. The book is called Port Luck and it's inspired by true events, as it says. And the true events behind the story are kind of fun because they're not exactly totally conclusive. What that means is, are they really true? All we know about the destination, which this book is loosely based on, which is called Port Luck, a little island off the Alaskan coast, is that an entire colony, if you will, an entire establishment kind of disappeared almost overnight, very rapidly. They don't know why, but there are speculations that a monster was involved. Ooh, and that's really what this book, Port Luck, is about. So I'm going to read a little bit from chapter 1, which really doesn't do a whole lot of setting it up, and then talk a little bit about the story in my review. Chapter 1. Ben Grover groped blindly at his hand, trying desperately to pull his orange beanie lower. Despite the gloves his fingers lost off feeling hours ago. His numb digits danced around unfeeling until they caught the fabric. He tugged hard, stretching it to cover as much of his skin as possible. The strings of his hood blew wildly in the wind, cursing himself for not checking the weather before their hike. He snatched the drawstrings and yanked on them, pulling the hood as tight as he could. Stealing a glance over his right shoulder, brutal gusts of wind and snow ripped past him. The horrendous storm made it difficult to see his girlfriend about 10 feet behind him. Helplessly, he watched as she fought against the wind. Excellent setting because Alaska is frickin' like that. That would be the location of Port Luck. I mean, it's just a frickin' rough environment, and that sums it up really great, really good, really well. Emily held her arms up to shield her face from the onslaught of snow. Her foot caught on something unseen hazard, and she fell forward, hands outstretched, becoming buried in the ever-growing mounds of snow. The rope tied around each of their waists tightened under the strain, the tension yanking Ben back a step, nearly causing him to lose his balance as well. From farther behind, Ben could see the shape of his best friend, Alex, shuffling through the snow. The scrawny hipster staggered up the fallen Emily. Ben watched him kneel down and say something to her. In his mind, he willed them to stand up and walk. They would freeze to death if they didn't stay out in the open. He let them... Let me do that again. They would freeze to death if they stayed out in the open. He let out a frustrated sigh when he saw Alex motion to him. Ben turned and trudged through the snow until he reached Emily. She was sitting up and rubbing her knee furiously. He crouched next to her and peeled her hands away from the injured knee. He could barely feel her legs through his dense gloves and her thick pants, especially when his fingers so damn numb, but he continued searching for any signs of trauma. "Is she okay?" Alex shouted as loudly as he could to be heard above the growing storm. Emily gave Alex a thumbs up. Looking around, Ben's heart beat faster. It was a complete whiteout. The snow hadn't been thick when they began their trek earlier that morning. From their elevation on I can't pronounce this. I'll probably put it back in there. Kenai Mountain, where they could see for miles in every direction. Great expanses of dead trees cascaded down the side of the mountain in all directions. In the distance, they could make out the navy blue waters of the Alaskan Gulf. Now, Ben couldn't see more than 20 feet in any direction. The storm had blown in from the north with little warning. Alex had begged him to turn back when it first began to snow, but dismissing it as little snow. Ben insisted they keep going. His entire life he'd wanted to reach Truly Peak, and he couldn't be damned. I'll go ahead and put that in the bottom. And he would be damned if he came this close just to turn back. He was kicking himself for that decision. That happens so often. There's a mountain range near where I live, and it has a trail called La Luz. And annually, they have about 35 rescues, and annually they have about 2 deaths. And that's literally right next to the city. So a lot of times people go up there thinking, "Oh, this will be okay. This mountain couldn't get us in trouble." A mountain can get you in trouble quick. "We have to get out in the open," Ben shouted. Let me do that again. "We have to get out of the open," Ben shouted. Emily peered around, searching for some sort of shelter. Squinting her eyes, she tried to make out something 50 yards from them, barely visible through the blinding snow. It was a dark spot on the rock face. A smile stretched across her face. It was a cave. She raised her hand and pointed to the spot. Ben and Alex followed her finger with their eyes. They scanned for a moment before Ben shouted, "I don't see anything." A blast of frigid snow blew into his mouth. The blistering cold wind carried shards of ice that pelted the roof of his mouth, and his hands flew to his face as he gasped in pain. Rage ripped through him. How could he have been so stupid? He punched the snow and yelled a barbaric cry. Emily shielded herself from the snow, picked up and said in Ben's sudden outburst. She grabbed his arm and pointed again. "I think that's a cave." "What?" Ben asked. Emily pulled him close and yelled directly into his ear. "I think I see a cave." I'm going to go ahead and stop there because I think it sets it up. So, they probably go into the cave. Ooh, a lot of this story is very predictable. And that is not a bad thing, because the reality is you dive into something because you want to read it, you want the reward of reading it, the story and all that. And a lot of times a story can shock you and that makes it engaging, or it can be exactly what you're looking for. And the reality is, meeting expectations is precisely why I give Portluck 5 stars. The green heavy monster is going to go ahead and say something. It had some mechanical issues. I'm not going to lie. Was that an issue? The engaging elements of the story, the depth of character, the realism as far as where the characters will be coming from. You know, could this happen? How much suspension of disbelief did I need to do? The book delivered. It was really fun. I recommend it to everyone. And the author, he has a lot of titles out there that are pretty popular, which is cool because the cryptid world doesn't get a whole lot of respect from science, from mainstream, pretty much wherever. So anytime you have a book featuring a cryptid creature and it works, that's awesome. So that being said, it is time for a shameless self-plug, even though it's like the 3rd title of mine I've mentioned. But my book, Something Wild, which is a follow-up to my first book, which was Double Blind, Something Wild may or may not be a creature feature. So I highly recommend you check that one out because it's gotten really good remarks. I thank you for being with me for this read thus far. Doubleheader, 2 good books, 5 stars. If you made it with me this far, again, I thank you. If you didn't make it this far, I tried. So if there are any suggestions of books you would like me to read, I'm way far behind on my reading list already and my production of live videos. But leave it in the comments. I will try to get to it whenever